Welcome back, everybody. It's 2021. It's May 12th, and came to the garden to do some planting yesterday, and I found that there were a lot of weeds. Now, there usually aren't weeds, but I knew that the wood chips were getting low, and I knew that the weeds would be coming. So yesterday when I came, there was actually a whole lot of this sort of thing right here. If you can take a look down, the wood chips are really sparse. You see, it's not very far before you're running into soil. And a lot of times when people have problems, they say the wood chips don't work. It's for this reason, the wood chips aren't thick enough. And you know, you can come along and just pull those right out. They come out so easy. So I went through this whole garden, and I did that throughout the whole garden. And it's worthy to note that I left the weeds just lay here. And I leave them lay because they just dry up in the sun. A lot of people in the old days, they just throw them out of the garden. But I don't throw them out of the garden because those plants break down into nitrogen that help break down the carbon. So they're really, really helpful to have. And you just leave them in as long as they don't have seed in them. Let's take a look over here. I've already put some peas in a couple of weeks ago, and they're getting a good start. I put those in between the rows of pole beans. The peas will be gone by the time the pole beans start to grow. They haven't even been planted yet. And the potatoes are in. Well, it's been 3 years since I put any fresh covering on or manure, so here we'll go with a layer of manure and then put some wood chips over it and get things planted. It's been 3 years since I put new wood chips on, and I did not put more manure on at that time. You don't have to put manure on each time that you install a new layer of wood chips. It's only if you want to. It's probably been 5 or 6 years since this garden has had any manure put on, so I thought I'd put some on now. Throw a little composted manure in there.
Okay.
Go ahead. What we've got is we've got manure on top of some older wood chips, and I'm using the shovel to get down through those wood chips and throwing the little manure in behind the shovel just to give those potatoes a little kickstart. And
very compost manure though, right? Yeah.
Yes. That gold.
Compost manure?
Composted manure. Fresh wood chips on top.
I guess you want a pepper plant.
A starter pepper. And they're smiling already, saying thank you, loving it. Watch me grow. Well, planting beans, pole beans, and 1.5 inches deep in some nice soil, 4 inches apart. And they'll like that.
1.5 inches deep, 4 inches apart. This is my row of beans. I'd love to place the beans and then go down. I don't know why. I love numbers also, so I love to count. And then I ended up finding out as I put these, I don't aim for a number, but I count as I go. And I found out that I had 70 beans in one row. And because 7 is the number of God, 10 times, that seemed pretty fun. And I have 2 rows of them, so double. It was just kind of fun. Amazing. Little beans just waiting to be planted.
Getting in our new cantaloupe plants, seeds. Soil's good. Alrighty. All ready for the seeds. I put about 4 or 5 on each hole. That way they come up. Yeah, I just mix them in a little bit, cover them. They're good to go. Yeah. Well, we got the beans planted, the pole beans, and now this is the only time I water, even in drought conditions. It is to germinate the seeds. And we've got most of the garden planted now, and a layer of manure over most of it, a layer of fresh wood chips over some of it. We need more fresh wood chips, and I'm hoping they'll come soon. You never can tell for sure, but we're starting to look pretty good for this year. It's May 31st, and we have planted some things already in the garden, and I wanted to show you the transition of old wood chips to new wood chips, and if you choose to put manure on, then the addition of that as well. If you look down here, you can see this is a space where these are old wood chips, and here's some weeds that are starting to grow, and they're very easy to get out at this stage. You just pull them out just like that, and it doesn't take much with your rake, or the clover gets down a little deeper, but then you can just leave those lay on top. But if you look, it's not very deep of wood chips before you have the soil. That's why the weeds are starting to grow. So what I've done here is I had a section of the garden where I just put fresh wood chips on. I got a couple of loads that showed up at the garden, so I put those on, and then I was able to get some good composted horse manure, and that's what you see here. And I put that horse manure on up to 2 inches thick. You can do less, you can do more, it's up to you. But I will then cover that horse manure with more fresh wood chips. That way it keeps any seeds that are in there, weed seeds, it keeps them from growing, and it provides a really good cover. Your manure is under the chips, and it can it'll break down, and it'll wash that. The water will come and wash that rich nutrient tea down into the roots of the plants. I can also, and I will, as time goes on, take that manure and take the finer stuff. I might filter it, screen it, and then put it on the fresh wood chips. And that way, where I haven't put manure already, that will actually go down through. It'll filter down through the wood chips, and it'll get to the plants as well. But when you saw earlier in the video, we were planting seeds, how I just parted the wood chips and then stirred up the soil a little bit and put some manure in with the seeds to plant them, and then didn't cover over the seeds. Here's the result. Here it is now, a couple of weeks later, and you can see the wood chips with the wind and the rain. The wood chips have fallen down in, and again, I didn't cover those seeds with wood chips. I just put the soil. Now, these are butternut squash, and they've come up, the seeds have come up, and the wood chips are falling down in. I will leave them just like this. So the wood chips have fallen down in, the seeds came up, the wood chips and the leaves are underneath. You can see a leaf just blew in, and they'll just sit there it'll be great. It'll help provide moisture and a little bit of weed control. Here we have butternut squash plants that are in. They have come up, they're growing well, and you can see in the middle of this circle, there's manure, and then the wood chips were put on outside of this trellis that the plants will grow up. I will put some wood chips on the inside as well for weed prevention and moisture retention. And I want to add that all of the wood chips that I put on, every time I put wood chips on, it's 4 to 6 inches of wood chips. The more you put on, the longer they will last, the more soil you will build. You don't want to put so many on that it makes it difficult to get through them to plant your seeds and your plants. But 4 to 6 inches really works quite well. You'll get 2, 3, 4 years out of that before you have to put more on. What I'm doing here is I'm screening some composted wood chips, and I'm doing it by hand, which I don't really recommend, especially if you're going to do a lot of them. I would use a bigger screen, the same wheelbarrow and a shovel. But what you end up with when you run your wood chips through this screen is you end up with a much finer composted wood chips soil. And you can see that that's really rich. There are little squigglies in there. I've already found some worms in there. And this is ready just to go right on the garden and be just fine. And you can see the difference between this, which are composted, screened wood chips, versus the fresh wood chips from the tree service people. These are much coarser. They're not broken down like the composted chips. You cannot plant in these wood chips. This was the issue that I had the first year. And when I say on film or in these videos that when Paul Gauci said that you do know that the covering, that the wood chips are just the covering, right? It means that the wood chips are just the covering to go over the soil that you grow in. So you can use the composted and you can put that on, and that will still be your covering. But this is what we use as our covering. And this compost, it breaks down, but you cannot plant directly in this. Your plants won't be healthy, they won't grow well. This is what Paul Gauci uses most of the time. Composted, screened wood chips. So when putting fresh wood chips on a garden after you already have plants growing, here's what I do. If it's just a single plant, like here we have a squash plant. You may have rows of something, but this is just a single plant. And what I will do is take a 5-gallon bucket, put it over the plant. You don't want to leave it there all day because that, if it's a hot sunny day, that'll kill the plant. And then I'm just using a bucket here, but I often would use, usually would use a wheelbarrow and a shovel or fork, and then just put the chips around the bucket. Just kind of settle them in a little bit. What I like to do is just kind of wiggle the bucket, pick it up, and there you go. And you have your wood chips down. Your plant is already established. That's a big old piece of bark. It doesn't hurt anything. But in time, what'll happen, the rain will come, and again, it'll just wash some of these down and fill in around the plant. It'll be great. Or you can do it by hand, doesn't matter, either way. Now let's take a look at if you have a row of something growing, what you can do. What we're going to do is we're just going to pretend that these stakes, these posts, are seedlings that are already in, that they're a row of seedlings that have already come up. Because I don't have any seedlings to use for an example right now, so we'll just pretend. What I will do is I will take my 4-inch PVC pipe that I have ripped in half, and I will lay it down over the seedlings, over the row of seedlings. And again, I usually would take the wheelbarrow and a shovel or fork, but for the sake of this video, I will just take the buckets and you just cover the pipe. And you just work right along. And once you get your pipe covered, then what I do is take the rake and I just pull it off the top of the pipe. And depending on what's underneath and how big the seedlings are, I can leave more or less wood chips on the pipe. Then just wiggle the pipe some as you pull it up, and you see your seedlings have been protected. They're not covered with wood chips. It makes a good row, and those wood chips, as the plants grow, will fall down and start filling in where they were covered, where the pipe covered over, without hurting the plants. Works really well. That's what I did with the sweet potatoes up there. They're loving it. One last thing. After the seeds are in, the plants are up, if you already have fresh wood chips, I'd like to show you what I do then. And what you see here is I have put fresh manure, composted manure down, and a row of peas, which I always grow between my beans, because the peas will come up and we'll harvest those, and the peas will be done by the time the beans get very high. And then over on this side, I have put the manure, and I've put fresh wood chips over the manure, and then made the trough for the beans to be planted. The bean seeds were planted. As you can see, they have come up. Here's one that is just starting to come up. But at this point, what I will do, and what I can do, but don't have to do, you can see there's a little mound here where I pulled the wood chips out. I can just kind of go along and level that off a little bit, pushing those down in gently. If the plants were a little bigger, it would be better, but it's not going to hurt them at this stage at all. And it just helps to get the wood chips down around the base of the plant some. It's totally not required, but it's helpful. And that is how we do fresh wood chips on a garden after things have been planted and not damage the plants. Here we have the lima beans, the pole beans, lima beans that are coming up. These were planted about a week ago, I think less. We've had a good amount of water lately, so that really helps these seeds to germinate. And if we look through the trellis, you can see the beans that are coming up over there are the ones that Diane planted last week, 2 weeks ago. So things are starting to take off. Potatoes doing great. And this is the little sweet potato patch. The sweet potatoes were already planted before I got the new wood chips, and I put the PVC pipe over the rows of sweet potatoes and then put the wood chips on. You can see they did very, very well. It's really quite an amazing way to get the wood chips on the garden. It works really good.